Hi, Abraham. I'm so happy to be here. Yesterday, I was sitting at my computer, and we've had quite a bit of rain in Texas, and I thought, boy, I'd sure like a break. And so I was thinking sun and beach. I remembered seeing Abraham's schedule a couple of months ago and thought, I know that Abraham's going out to L.A. So I pulled up your website, and there you were. Oh my gosh, Abraham's going to be in LA tomorrow. And so my next thought was, okay, I really want to go. And and normally, you know, I toss the coin to see if it's right. But this time I didn't even toss a coin. I just decided to see how it flowed and to see where my resistance might show up.
Why does there have to be resistance?
Yeah, exactly.
Why can't you just say, I want to go, so I go?
And so, yes.
I think I'll go over there, now I think I'll go over there, now I think I'll go over there. And everywhere I go, well-being is.
Yes. So I picked up the phone and I called the airlines and got this, I mean, what I had thought was going to be a fare that I couldn't manage. It was unbelievable. So I thought, okay, that's a good indication, keep going. So I called the hotel, and so anyway, everything just flowed, and it worked, and I found the sitter I needed, and so I got in my car, and it was a 5 o'clock traffic to get to the airport, and there was just no traffic. It did seem as if the seas parted just for me to get to L.A. And then I get here, and I can always sense there's always a little bit of stuff. I guess it's guilt or something, or, you know, or when is the other shoe going to drop, sort of vaguely back there, and I try to ignore it. And so the flight was great. Everything seemed to be in perfect order, and then I got in a cab to come here, and I was ready to be here. I was not ready to be on 405 at traffic hour, but then that was okay. And then I noticed, wow, the other side of the freeway is stopped, and we're really moving along. And then I noticed my cab started to slow down, and the cab driver, I don't know, he was either drunk or something, but he told me he was sleepy when I asked him if he was all right. And then I felt it all just surge up. And I noticed all this resistance, then those thoughts, see, Ellen, you're creating this because you were waiting for your other shoe to drop. You didn't think it could be as smoothly as you wanted it to be. And so I thought, well, I'm just going to play with it and try to see if I could make this resistance into something better. So I would lean up and I'd say, excuse me, what's the speed limit? Because he was going 40 and everybody else was going 70. And then I'd sit back and I'd wait, and then I would get all nervous, and it just, because I wanted to get there, and I didn't like him falling asleep at the wheel, and should I put my seatbelt on? Finally I said, do you want me to drive? I know where we're going. And so finally he said, no. And finally, yeah, you know, it costs so much money to just get from the airport to here, almost as much as it did for me to fly out here. And I thought, that is so funny. It all went so well. And the last tiny segment to make it here seemed like the shoe that I was waiting to drop. And even though the whole experience was wonderful, and here I am, I had those dream experiences again where I seem to be always on one end or the other. So I'm sailing and soaring with angels, and then the next night I have this very disturbing dream.
We think you've summed all of this up pretty well. We think that you can feel that well-being is the basis of your life in spite of you.
Yes.
In other words, we think that little by little by little, you are releasing your long held to beliefs that well-being really isn't the order of things and that something's going to show up in order to prove it. In other words, as you were offering your story of how you thought you might like to go, and then you were more optimistic than pessimistic, and then more optimistic than pessimistic. You sort of kept talking yourself back into your optimism, even though the pessimism sort of wanted to rise up. We are wanting to say to you that eventually that optimism will be the thing that is the most natural. You won't be consciously fighting for your optimism. And we think that examples like this, where you say, and mostly it went very, very well. I could feel I was in a vortex. It felt like I was guided. I got the impulse to go. I looked on the website. It was the perfect time for me to go. It was the perfect time that airfares were light. It was the perfect time that traffic was light. I had a very good flight. I got to the airport. Everything unfolded. In other words, as you focus on how much of it really was a vibrational match to the way you felt, then you begin to trust yourself, and more importantly, trust that the universal forces are as we say that they are. Now, you said something very important about how most of it did go well. And then you started chastising yourself a little bit, that you knew that you were your own fly in your own ointment, and you could feel how you were the only reason that it bogged down even a little bit, and you were realizing that you could have made it more joyful. In other words, you actually attracted that particular cab because of the pessimistic part of your experience. In other words, and when you think about it, your intention to be safe, your intention to make the flight, those intentions that had been more in place, you were able to achieve those more readily. But when it got down to the nitty-gritty, the nitpicking stuff, that's sort of where you lost your way a little bit. And so can you imagine what it is like to be an energy coming forth to be born into this new baby? In other words, can you feel how much has been set into motion that is right? Can you feel the perfection of the platform? In other words, the organization of things, even the idea that the physical fetus can be born in this environment, and the way the energy moves into it, and the platform. In other words, do you feel how much well-being exists on this planet? Do you feel how the planet spins in its orbit, and the food continues to grow, and the perfect amount of water moves around in order to keep the gardens green? In other words, isn't it an extraordinary environment of well-being? And yet you can still, with all of this well-being, with a huge proportion of well-being to the minuscule not well-being, still your news can focus upon the part that is not well-being, just as you can focus upon the part that is not well-being. Sooner or later, you might want to just give that pessimism up. You might want to just stop saying that the basis of this life is one of evil and hardship and badness, and we have to prove our way out of it, which seems to be what a lot of humans think, but it is so backwards. There is no source of badness. There is no source of evil. There is no source of darkness. You don't walk into a room and look for a dark switch. There isn't one. You can flip the switch that resists the light, but there's no switch that you flip that makes inky darkness. There are a lot of physical humans that sort of got off on this thought that well-being really doesn't abound, that you have to earn it and work for it. And it could be because you were exposed to an exaggerated pocket that didn't feel like so much well-being. And so those were the expectations that you began to develop. It doesn't matter how you got there. The premise is not right. The premise is a false premise. The premise that is the reality that we know to be is that well-being abounds. You just have to look around and acknowledge it. And so if well-being abounds, then why can it not affect my life in not only this way and this way and this way and this way, but in this way and 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 that way and that way and that way? Why can't well-being be reflected in my life in all ways? That's the way it is supposed to be. You did not ever go forth and say, now listen, you are allotted so much well-being. And most people, according to our statistics, utilize that up by about the time they're 7. So after then, things will not go so well for you. So you might want to save your well-being for times when it really matters, because mostly there's not very much well-being. And yet humans sort of run around acting like that's what they think, when the reality of it is there is endless well-being, and it comes in proportion to your desire. And the more you mix it up and the more desire is born within you, the more that comes forth. And your work is just to get yourself into the place of expecting well-being. Expecting. Do you feel the power of the word expecting? expecting. Expecting means this is what I think is going to happen. Expecting means this is what I think is going to happen. And you say, oh boy, I would like to expect this to happen, but it's hard to expect what I want to happen when these things have been happening. And we say, don't think about those things. You keep them active in your vibration, and that's what causes expectation. We'll give you a definition, an Abraham definition of expectation. Expectation is the belief I've activated most. Expectation are the thoughts I think about most often. Expectation is the most practiced thought, that's all. So if you expect to get lost, so to speak, as in our first analogy today, then you might want to step back and think about some things that are positive in nature that you also expect. In other words, you might have expected the bombs to drop on Baghdad. You might have expected that, and it might not have felt good to expect it. But you also expected the sun to come up. We know you expected the sun to come up. We know you expect there to be food in your market. We know you expect to have a good lunch here somewhere. In other words, begin practicing the expectations that are life-giving while you practice them. And then before you know it, you'll just expect well-being. So you get a cab driver who is driving 40 and everybody around is going 70. And instead of expecting there to be something wrong with that, you'll think things like, he knows the flow of the traffic. And he knows where he's going. And this is the rhythm that works best for him. And he's learned that he can drive 70, then 20, then 70, then 20, then 70, then 20, or he can drive 40 and sort of make it comfortable. He's learned that people can race all around him and do crazy things, or that he can just kind of go down the road in this steady place. He's learned that he's more comfortable here. And I certainly want my driver to do what's most comfortable for him. And after all, this is an adventure. Why am I in such a hurry to get to where I'm going? Why am I not enjoying the adventure that I'm on? Why am I not looking out the window and looking to see what I can see? Why am I not conversing with this man in a positive way? Why am I not enjoying the book that I have in my pocket? Or why am I not using this as a time to meditate? Why am I not using this as a time that I let the cells of my body regenerate fully? In other words, I have this ongoing adventure. Why do I choose to be unhappy now because I think I want to get somewhere where I'll be happy later, you see? That's at the crux of the whole thing, isn't it? Yes. Good time for a segment of refreshment. We are.